You can go down the list of teams that have won at high rates. Eventually, the discourse from the public starts to change, and the chatter turns to, this is annoying, these guys win too much, when just a few months ago or years ago, it was, look how awesome they are. And the Thunder are really starting to go through that right now. That's all ESPN would be. It would be Thunder, 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 Thunder.
I'm sorry if the team in the middle of America is the best team in the NBA right now. I'm sorry, they only did their job. They scouted. They drafted well. They traded well. Don't punish them for winning.
Streaming from Oklahoma's own digital studio, this is Jeremie Poplin with Thunder Breakdown.
It's another Oklahoma Thunder Breakdown here on Oklahoma's Own Sports. My name is Jeremie Poplin. That is Steve McGehee. The Thunder have already wrapped up the first-round series with the Phoenix Suns. Really no surprise there. At all. Maybe Steve has a few surprises that ended up playing out from the series, but as we sit here and casually wait on the Rockets and Lakers taking their sweet you-know-what time in order for us to finally get a full glimpse of what the schedule looks like. Steve, let's just talk about the first round for the Thunder. What stood out to you from their performance against the Suns?
Well, I thought this was their toughest first-round opponent since Mark Daigneault took over. Nothing against New Orleans 2 years ago. They had Ingram and C.J. McCollum. But I have a lot of respect for the Suns, Booker, Dillon Brooks, Jalen Green. They missed Mark Williams, obviously, but that's a pretty good team there, and they're well coached. But I thought this was their toughest opponent compared to New Orleans and Memphis. Other people out there may waver on that, but I thought this was going to be the toughest one. And I thought maybe Phoenix would win Game 3. But when they didn't, I'm like, no, this thing's going to be over in 4. But Oklahoma City didn't flinch. They looked like the team that had been down this road before, and winning at home or winning on the road, they don't really waver on that. Even though I thought the Phoenix crowd just wasn't playoff loud like you would see in San Antonio or in Dallas or in Oklahoma City, or definitely not as loud as Minnesota. Minnesota is one of the louder ones, but they did what they had to. They won without Jalen Williams. I'm not sure when. Don't have that answer on Dub, but he is. He did something after practice yesterday. They had to make sure we were scooted out before he did something. But he is, moving. He's walking. I don't know if he's running or jumping, but they're ramping him up to, try to get back in the playoff picture for the Oklahoma City Thunder. But as you know, they're not going to rush it. But, job well done by the Thunder. And the way with all the injuries that are going right now, if you can win a series in 4 straight, that bodes well. So, because the more you play, the bigger the risk of an injury.
It's a weird one because clearly you want J-Dub, your second best player essentially, in the lineup. But the one thing that has benefited them is the trials and tribulations through the injury front that they had this season. Right? Because I think if J-Dub gets injured in a playoff series where they didn't really have the ability to kind of work out those details that Mark has always talked about without playing with him. Maybe you're talking about Phoenix, maybe grabbing a game. Who knows, maybe 2 in a perfect world before ultimately the roster of Oklahoma City just takes over. But that's at least one positive, that they've gone through all of this and nothing is going to catch them off guard.
Back to that series real quick before I talk about, playing without J-Dub. I thought this was a great compliment for the Thunder. The Suns GM a couple of days ago saying that from Game 1 to Game 4, they improved. And in Game 3 and Game 4, they're probably winning one or both of those games if they're not playing the Thunder. That just shows you how much respect he had for Oklahoma City. And he's probably right. They probably would win a game against somebody else just because they played better as the series went on. It just wasn't enough. And as far as Jalen Williams goes, they started the year without him. He didn't come on until late November. And when he did come back, he was still trying to figure out the wrist, and that was, his shot wasn't what it used to be. He wasn't out of shape or anything like that. He was just trying to figure out the wrist. And then once he got the wrist figured out and learned how to play with it, now you got the hamstring in Miami, you got the hamstring in Phoenix, and then you got the hamstring again against the Phoenix Suns. So, they have a deep bench, as you know, Jeremy, and they'll utilize it all the way down if they have to. And at any moment, those guys are ready to play. Kendrick Williams, Aaron Wiggins, those two come to mind. So they would love to have Dub, but they have reserves, and that's what makes them the defending NBA champ.
I want to stick with the series for a bit before we get into more of a general question. To me, the strength of Phoenix going in was always just how they're constructed from a roster standpoint is the wings that they have. And there was a point in time where you looked, and I thought Oklahoma City did a great job of this, and some of it was Phoenix reluctancy as well to shoot the three ball, especially the corner three. That was an area that I was a little bit surprised, but the more I went back and I watched, like during the course of that series, I thought, no, this is Oklahoma City's defense kind of dictating that a little bit more and forcing Phoenix to be more of a mid-range shot, because the quantity of threes that Phoenix was taking just from construction, they were going to have to shoot lights out of the gym, right, in order to get multiple victories in a series like that, and they just didn't do it. Some of that's because of how good the Thunder defense was.
Yeah, their perimeter defense was really good against the Suns, and going in, Phoenix was going to have to shoot, get in this series, to get a win, maybe two. They're going to have to shoot some threes and knock them down. And Oklahoma City took that away in all 4 games, and they said, "Hey, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to beat us in the mid-range, and you're going to have to beat us inside." And without Mark Williams, that was going to be really tough. Oso did some good things at times, but Hartenstein, Jay Will, Chet inside, rim protection, that's tough on the Suns. But Phoenix, Grayson Allen, Gillespie, Green, Booker, those are good guys, but I thought the best player for them in the series was easily Dillon Brooks.
Yes.
Easily Dillon Brooks. Without him, I don't know, they would have been blowouts, I think. But Dillon Brooks, he showed that he has really improved over the last couple of years and made himself a very valuable player for the Suns.
The other thing, too, that stood out from the series, and this will get into the general question that I have, is I knew Phoenix was cooked. Well, I knew they were cooked from the minute that series was announced. Just they're not on that level, and they're not good enough. It was always about, can they get one game here or there, and ultimately they didn't. But it really hit me when they kind of morphed into what the overall talking point has been about the Thunder, which is more into the complaints about the reffing element to this. And it got really loud there after a couple of games, and I thought they're mentally so hooked on that right now. They're not going to get out of their own way. They've already lost this game physically and mentally.
Yeah, I'm not into the referee complaining. Talk to the refs about the calls. Is he getting fouled? I don't think he's falling down on purpose. Maybe embellishes a little bit. We're talking about SGA, but every player out there embellishes a little bit when they get knocked down or get touched. Yes. But the foul stuff, I find it hard to believe. Social media would have been nuts, on that Jordan push-off against Utah Jazz in the finals. But, all great players find a way to get to the free throw line. And I don't think Shea's any worse than Michael Jordan. You name any all-star, the goal is to put points on the board and you find a way to do it. But as far as him like flopping and all that, he's not a flopper. There's a lot of floppers out there. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is certainly not a flopper, because every time you flop, there's a chance you could get hurt. It's something that's a hardwood floor. It's not, you're not on a bouncy surface. So I don't think he's flopping. I just find that narrative, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. Here's a guy that's only missed one shot in the fourth quarter since late March. How about that? That's a pretty good stat to think on,
no doubt.
And he can turn a game like that in a heartbeat. I think he had 3 straight buckets in game 4. Is either game 4 or game 3? Just like that. He comes in 3, 2, 2, and the game kind of shifts towards the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's what makes him the great player, not because he can draw fouls and get points, get stat padding at the free throw line. I'm just tired of that storyline. It's obviously the team that loses may discuss that. You're never going to hear Mark Daigneault talk about he'll say it over and over again. We fouled too much. We fouled too much, instead of saying, this guy was foul baiting and there were some questionable calls. Mark will just come out and say, we got to learn not to foul. We're too handsy in this loss. We got to make sure we don't overfoul. I hear him say that all the time coming off a loss.
I had some notes, and because I wanted to make sure that we were able to talk through this. Typically, when there's a situation like this, to me, Steve, there always has to be the bad guy. There has to be, the cause of this, because we as a society, we need a singular entity, right, to be able to point to and say, no, it's your fault and you're causing all this blame. And to me, what's happening right now in the discourse is that this is more about the NBA officiating discourse in general, and the fan base automatically points to Oklahoma City and says that they're the big problem, when quite frankly all they're doing is that they're just exposing what has been the long-standing league-wide concerns about officiating within the league in general. So and this belief that they're being, selectively enforced. Say what you want to, like, Oklahoma City does nothing more than tiptoe up to the line, right? This is how they're taught from an organizational standpoint about where they can exploit some of these elements are. Championship organizations are going to search for every edge that they can get. Mm-hmm. And that's what Oklahoma City is doing right now. And if the contact is legal, like they look at it from a standpoint of we're gonna go and try to push it to the limit and get away with as much as we can until you start calling it a particular way.
Exactly.
So the discourse shouldn't be just with Oklahoma City. This has to be overall with the NBA officiating in general. They just happen to be the bad guy in this scenario.
Well, the officiating from the high school, from little league to high school to college to the pros in any sport, it's the consistency. You have 3 referees that may call it one way, and then the next game you got 3 different referees that may see and call it a different way. There's no consistency, and I'm okay with that. You're going to know going in. The coaches and their staff have a pretty good idea. I'm like, okay, all right, that's okay. Those are the 3 people doing the game. Last time he called this or she called that, or we got to make sure, you have to scout the referees as well. But that's been the problem in sports all along, is there's no consistency. You may get away with it one week, and then the next week you don't get away with it. So I don't think there's an answer for that. They're human. They're not robotic. Hopefully we never get to robots calling the games, but it seems like we're trending that way eventually one day. But they make human error. That's why you have the challenges out there, and the challenges do slow down the game. But if there's a call that you think is wrong, challenge it, and you may win it. So I don't see the blame and all that. I just blaming the refs is just in my opinion, just an easy cop out. Now, if the game's on the line and your guy makes a 3 and the guy underneath the basket, the same time the ball goes in, gets called for an offensive foul that was questionable, you can blame the ref on that. If the call determines the outcome of the game late, then that's where you have the problem. But complaining about fouls called in the second and third quarter just seems kind of pointless. It's hot air to me. You got beat. That's the bottom line. You got beat in the game. Didn't get beat because they knocked down 15 free throws. You got beat because your defense wasn't good enough or your offense wasn't good enough. That's just my take on that. But inconsistency with the referees at all levels, that's always been an issue. And I have nothing but respect for referees, because I couldn't handle people yelling at you, saying how bad you are, just from everywhere. I would hate to do it.
Yeah.
You couldn't pay me enough money to be a referee. I don't know about you, but could you be an NBA referee if the price was right?
I've had a very difficult time being that. I mean, I'm not good at anything in general anyway. So
no.
And for one last thing on this, we've got to stop with the clips from the 90s version of what happened in determining games and reffing games. Like, if that version of basketball lives on Pluto right now. Like, we're in a completely different time frame of this, but we're all held captive by the nostalgia element that lives in our brain, especially if you're an of a particular age that you remember the back in my day version of the game. Like it's
The Bill
gone.
Laimbeer days. I remember the Bill Laimbeer days. You come down the lane, you may lose your head.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I just wanted to bring that up because there's a lot. And look, we've both been sports fans long enough to know that this happens with teams when they start to win at high levels and win a large number of games. The discourse changes and it goes from, man, that's a fun team to watch, to they win too much. And it happens quickly in the world of sports, and it happens to every great entity. You can go down the list of teams that have won at high rates. Eventually, the discourse from the public starts to change, and the chatter turns to, this is annoying, these guys win too much, when just a few months ago or years ago it was, look how awesome they are. And the Thunder are really starting to go through that right now.
Yeah, no doubt. If they were the Knicks or the Lakers, there wouldn't be any of that chatter about we're getting bored with the Thunder.
That's all like, ESPN would be. It would be Thunder,
like,
Thunder, 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 Thunder.
I'm sorry if the team in the middle of America is the best team in the NBA right now. I'm sorry, they only did their job. They scouted, they drafted well, they traded well. Don't punish them for winning. That's stupid.
All right, so let's move to the next series. Lakers or Rockets. Not that the Thunder have a preference, but do you have a preference? And I don't know how much gas the Lakers have. By the time we're watching this, I mean, the series could be over, but
they had to pack for Oklahoma City in case they won in Houston. Then they just go from Houston to Oklahoma City and get ready for the game. I guess that would be on Sunday. I don't have a preference. It'd be cool to see LeBron one more time, but it'd also be cool to see Kevin Durant one more time. I'm not sure how many more playoff runs those two guys have. Flip a coin. As far as winning this game, 6 in Houston, heads Lakers, tails Rockets. That's how even this is for tonight.
Did the series between those teams during the regular season, was there anything that you picked up on individually between the two teams and the potential future matchup?
Rockets played the Thunder tough. Obviously that first game of the year, double overtime. The Lakers, the last time the Lakers played here, it was over in the first quarter. So it's hard to judge on that. But, Luka didn't get hurt until the third quarter. Now, he kind of tweaked it, I think, in the first half, if I remember. I was archiving that stuff earlier today. I'm catching up on my archiving, and I saw him favoring his injury that, I think it was the right leg. I can't remember which one it was, but you could see it early in the game, like, he kind of injured it there and just kept on playing. And, Austin Reeves went out in that game as well, but he played the whole game, I believe, before it was, obviously they took him out early because it was a blowout. But I would say the Rockets would probably give the Thunder more trouble than the Lakers. Luka may come back at some point in this series, but it's not 100% Luka, that's for sure. I would guess if you had to throw a number out, maybe game 3 or game 4 out in LA. But, Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, Cason Wallace, they're waiting on him. They're waiting on him if he comes back.
Who's been the unsung hero so far? Who's not getting enough credit for the way they played in the first round?
Alex Caruso. Caruso is just a playoff machine. He you gotta raise your level when you get to the playoffs. And that guy does. He's just a ball hawk. He's annoying on defense. He's just pesky. He's knocking down shots. We were worried about his three-point shooting at times in the regular season. I'm like, well, let's just pump the brakes on here. We'll see what he does in the playoffs. And he's been knocking him down. It's just just nothing but respect for Caruso. With a guy like that, you have a chance to win another NBA championship. And he's got to stay healthy too. He gets nicked up from time to time, but Alex he's a nuisance for the opponent when it comes to playoff basketball.
And then I guess Minnesota did a couple of teams some potential favors, right?
I thought, remember Denver winning in San Antonio? I'm like, that's going to – you got to let it play out. You got to let it play out. And it's just – I'm not sure what happened to Denver. I really don't. You change coaches, and then you lose a 7-game series to the Thunder, and then you go through the year. It was kind of up and down for them. Nikola was incredible. I don't think he's going to win the MVP, but he had an MVP-type season. again. He's a triple-double machine. But I'm not sure what happened to Denver. I guess they don't have the right mix. I thought Cam Johnson was a good pickup. He did knock down 5 threes, but it wasn't good enough. But for Minnesota to do what they did without DiVincenzo and Anthony Edwards, that was pretty incredible. And McDaniels is another underrated player.
Oh,
and he's
yes.
a nuisance as well.
Great
He's
series.
a taller version of Alex Caruso.
Yeah. Real quick, Nuggets. I don't know about them moving forward, right? Like, to me, this was kind of a last gasp effort with this group because, Kevin O'Connor had this, and I agree with most of it. You've got Aaron Gordon, who hasn't been durable, right? Christian Braun's on a bad contract. Cam Johnson hasn't been great. Tim Hardaway's not a playoff player at all.
Yeah, I
Peyton
saw
Watson's
that, yeah.
a free agent. And then you've got Adelman, so this is now twice that they've been bounced from this moving forward. And not only that, but, they don't have any young players with value. 26 pick this year in the pick swaps. The Thunder own the rights to a top 5 protected pick that are moving forward. Like, I don't know what the future of Denver as a competitor in the Western Conference looks like. So maybe this is actually the true beginning, Steve, of the San Antonio, Oklahoma City 5-6 years of knowing that that's more than likely going to be who the competitor is that could come out of the West.
Definitely. There's some other teams I think that Utah, maybe if they get a high draft pick, could be in that conversation, or they could be back in the I guess you can't tank anymore. I'm still trying to figure out those rules, but I think it's better than what they had from what I can gather on the information.
Right. Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, so we'll see about that. But I do like the fact that you can't win the first pick, 2 years in a row. But the odds of doing that would be astronomical. But let's see, Spurs and Thunder in the next 5 to 6 years. Yes to that. We'll see what Minnesota can do with Anthony Edwards. And Denver has to be it's got to be very challenging for them, since you mentioned those draft picks going to the Thunder. And the way the tanking is set up now, it's it's a slippery slope for them. Maybe they can get, I don't know who they would trade, Jamal Murray, or maybe you trade the big guy. How old is he? 30, 31?
Yeah, he's in that range. Yeah.
You hate to trade your best player away, but if you can get a ton in return, you can, work yourself back into the picture, 3 or 4 years from now. It's just a matter of, is an organization willing to wait it out 2 to 3 years? The Thunder, luckily that first year was a 70-game schedule due to the pandemic. And then the next year, they, had to not put their best foot forward. And then from there on out, it was giddy up and go. And they lose to the Timberwolves in the last play-in game for the 8th seed. So, can you get it done in 2? Well, Oklahoma City proved that you can get it done in 2 years. But they're in a tough spot. I'm glad I'm not the general manager of the Nuggets, because there's a lot of research and thinking it through, and there's probably some late nights and some headaches and some just tough to get to sleep trying to worry about how that team can get better moving forward. And they have a good lineup. It's just not the right lineup. It's just not the right lineup. I don't know.
The saying is, don't let the door hit you, right, on the way out, and that's what Minnesota was able to do to the Nuggets. So we got game 1 either coming up on Sunday or later on next week, depending on the outcome. Lakers and Rockets. Steve, good to catch up with you, man. Great work as always, and we'll have to start doing some more of these as we move forward.
I'm sure we will. All right, talk to you soon, Jeremy.
All right, that's Steve McGehee, our Thunder reporter, KWTV and Oklahoma's own sports own. You can catch him all over the state of Oklahoma. Hit that like and subscribe button. We'll see you next time here on another Thunder Breakdown.
Streaming from Oklahoma's own digital studio, this is Jeremie Poplin with Thunder Breakdown.